So this last presentation is going to talk about two unrelated modern issues that we see with intelligence and with the use of intelligence tests. So the first one we're going to talk about is something known as the Flynn Effect. I was actually told that this was referenced possibly in the show Pretty Little Liars. So if you watch that show, apparently they're fans of psychology and have referenced this in the very near past. And what the Flynn Effect is all about is the fact that as a society, we actually seem to be getting smarter. The average intelligence score is actually improving. Every couple years now, they have to re-standardize the existing intelligence tests because if they didn't rework them and rework how they were scored, the average person and the average IQ score would no longer be 100. So if you look at this graph here, you can see that change shown. In the year 1920, the average intelligence score based on our current standards was at around a 75. And as the years have progressed, we have gotten higher and higher and higher IQ scores. And so you see at the very end here where this chart ends, in 1990, the average score is a good 20 points higher than it was in 1920. So as a people and as a group, we are getting smarter, and no one's actually entirely sure why. There are a couple of different theories. One theory has to do possibly with improved education, that we are getting smarter because our educational systems are getting better because public education is mandated. Another theory says that we have improved nutrition. With improved nutrition, this means that people's brains can actually develop better and develop more. So maybe the fact that we have not only better nutrition, but better medical care, this could explain the increase. Yet another possible explanation based on environmental factors is possibly we live in a very stimulating environment currently, much more stimulating and interactive than it was back in the 1920s, 1930s. We're called upon often to multitask. We have a lot of things going on. So maybe the stimulating environment is stimulating our brains and our cortical development. So that could explain the increase. Lastly, there's another possible hypothesis called test familiarity, which is suggesting possibly that we're not getting smarter. Instead, we're just becoming more comfortable with taking tests. This possibly could explain it. Certainly, it has been shown that people who are homeschooled tend to score lower on traditional IQ tests than people who are in traditional public schools because they're not tested in the same way. So maybe some of this increase is just a product of the way our society is educating and it's not actual intelligence increasing. But regardless, no one really knows why the Flynn effect occurs. All we know is that we seem to be getting smarter for unknown reasons. Alright, so to switch gears, the last thing I wanted y'all to think about, at least a little in this chapter, is the impact that labels have on how we view people. Kind of what have been some of the consequences, both positive and negative, to the introduction of something like an intelligence test. What do we gain and what do we lose as a society now that we're able to pigeonhole someone and say your IQ is, this number? So if you want to look first at this chart here, you can find it yourself if you just want to go on the Wikipedia scale for the Stanford Binet. And it has some of the original names for different IQ scores as well as some of the modern terms. And I think that most of you have probably heard of this before, but I think it bears repeating. Originally, a lot of the levels for IQ, especially the lower levels, were words which at the time were just clinical terms. So you have the term moron, you have the term imbecile, you have the term idiot. At the time that they were used, they didn't really have a negative connotation. Nowadays, if you call someone an idiot, you're calling them something really bad. And it almost seems shocking to us that that would have been an IQ medically based term. But, the way that language evolves, what occurred is it started off as a clinical term, and it then transformed into something very, very derogatory. So, as you know, currently, we don't use these types of terms when we're talking about intelligence, and when we're talking about lower intelligence, we try to use a term like intellectual disability. There is, as you know, currently a movement to get rid of what is known as the R word. We're going to talk about that in a second, but I just thought it's certainly very interesting to look at all of these historical ways of assessing intelligence and think about how language evolves and how our view of words evolve as they become associated with different things. Now, if you want to look at the other impacts that labeling have on people, you can look first at what happens when someone is labeled as having a lower IQ. So they take an intelligence test, they score in maybe this range down here. What does this mean for them? First and foremost, of course, they're going to run into some judgments, oftentimes negative judgments, that they are stupid, that they are slow, that they deserve to be the butt of people's jokes. So certainly in some circles, having a low IQ makes you a target. However, there have been some good consequences that come out of one's ability to be labeled as having a lower IQ. For one, in order to be eligible for special education or for Social Security benefits, you need to fit certain requirements in the realm of intellectual disabilities. So having someone be labeled as a low IQ can be really beneficial to them because of all of the benefits and the help they can receive from society. Now, if we are to look at the more high IQs and those in that high range, there is a little bit of a consequence here if we label someone when they're really young as being, genius or near genius. What does that mean for their future? A lot of you might have been in possibly like a gifted and talented program at your middle school, or at least you might have known of one. We have programs from a very early age in schools where kids are picked out of their classroom and they're identified as, this kid's really bright, this kid has a lot of potential, we need to really focus on them. And so what might end up happening is someone's pegged at a very young age as, well, you're smarter than everyone, you have a really high IQ, so we're going to give you the best education possible. We're going to put you in special programs, we're going to surround you with like really stimulating people and a really stimulating environment. And so possibly this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're told from a young age that they have a high IQ, they're told a lot is expected of them, they're therefore given the best opportunities, and so maybe they turn out to be the smartest and most successful people because of the fact that they were treated this way from a young age. The same thing can happen with someone who has a lower IQ. From a very early point in their educational career, they're identified as, well, they're not as smart. They just can't pick this up as well. So we're not going to really spend as much time challenging them and searching out their other abilities. And so people can possibly turn out the way they have as adults because of the way they were treated as children. Possibly something to think about here is even FIAN's own system of using leveled classes. Some people are in favor of leveled classes. Some people are in favor of a more mainstreamed approach. The term mainstreaming means that you have people of all different capabilities just in one classroom, especially in terms of intellectual disability. You hear of an approach called integration, where instead of having special ed classes, you try to include people of all different intellectual abilities in the classroom at the same time. And so a lot of people think taking a mainstreamed approach is beneficial to everyone. Those who have maybe the lower abilities really benefit from being in a more challenging environment. Those people who have maybe the higher abilities, they also benefit from being able to act as teachers and thus reinforce their own learning in that way. So if you think about FIAN's leveled classes, are we creating a self-fulfilling prophecy? Are we telling the kids in AP that you are the best and the brightest, therefore you're going to get the best of this school? Are we telling the kids in the lower classes, well, you're in a lower class, maybe you're not going to be challenged as much? And I think obviously it depends on the teacher, it depends on the class. The hope is that in every class you're getting the best possible treatment, but it's something to think about when you look at a school that uses leveling. What are the ramifications of that decision? All right, last thing I want you to think about, and then you will be free from listening to my voice for the rest of vacation. Unless you want to replay these videos, you are welcome to do that. Host a movie night. I'm sure that's what y'all are going to do. I want you to spend a little bit of time thinking about this whole campaign to spread the word, to end the word. If you are not aware of what the R word stands for, it stands for the word retard or retarded, which currently is not considered the best way, certainly, to talk about someone with an intellectual disability. Much like on the previous slide where we saw words like imbecile and idiot, retard and retarded started off as a clinical term. It started off as just a clinical range you would fall in for your IQ, and then society took it over and it started to treat it in a really hurtful manner. And it was used as a put down, it was used as an insult, it's used now currently by people just in normal conversations talking about individuals who don't have intellectual disabilities, and it's become synonymous with something very negative and something very bad. So there are a lot of people out there who want to get rid of this word from our vernacular. They say it doesn't accomplish anything, it's just very, very hurtful. Language has consequences. If you're constantly using this word as a synonym for bad or for something that you dislike, what does that then mean for a person who has an intellectual disability and for whom this word is also used? And so there is certainly a website you can check out on this issue, which I will show you in a second. But then something else that has grown out of this whole movement to spread the word, to end the word. Just a year or so ago, President Obama actually signed into legislation something known as Rose's Law. And what this law did was it went through all of our previous legislation, any government documents, and it rewrote, instead of using the word retardation or retard or retarded, it now uses the term intellectual disability. So there is very much a culture shift to stop using this R word and to start using something which, as of now, hasn't gained that negative connotation. Now, here you can see the website. I just took a screenshot of it for you. So you can certainly go to it yourself, www.r-word.org. You can look through it. There's a pledge you can take. I know that earlier this year, I believe it was Project Unite, gave us the opportunity to sign that pledge. But I think it's worth investigating, worth looking into. I personally am very against the use of the R word. I think that language is really important and we need to examine how we use it. But then kind of the problem is, will this same connotation become attached to now the term intellectually disabled? Is it just an unfortunate product of our society that we are bound to do this to any term we attach to someone with a low IQ? So that's something to think about, and it's something you're actually going to be thinking about in your homework, which is coming up next. So your first assignment for this homework is to tell me, of all of the possible explanations for why the Flint effect is taking place, which two do you agree with most? If you are dissatisfied with the ones I provided, you can Google it. There are a couple more out there that I didn't give you. So tell me which two you agree with most and why. And then secondly, I want you to compose a short, I don't want to call it a paper because I don't want it to be any more than maybe 1 page typed, but I want you to tell me your personal opinion on this whole R word issue. Do you think that it's worthwhile? Do you think that it's kind of making a big deal out of nothing? So I want you to kind of flesh out what is your view of this campaign. If you want to get into also the entire power of language and how a lot of words tend to be used in a way that they're not created for, certainly a prime example of that would also be our society's use of the word gay. Has a lot of similarities to our use of the R word. You are free to do that. And I want you to be ready to discuss this in a BAM. Not sure exactly when that will happen when we return, but I did want to have at least half a class where we could sit down, talk about all your opinions on this, so everyone can really share their voice with each other. All right, so this will be due when you return to me right after vacation. So for periods B and C, that's going to be Monday, and period A, that's going to be Tuesday. Period A, don't forget that you have your test on Tuesday, first period. Everybody else, you also have it Tuesday, but I will see you Monday. All right, good luck with all of your work. Email me if you have questions, and I miss you all, and I can't wait to see you after vacation.